Daniel Sports Central, we go for our next scheduled preview this offseason, and it's going to be the Nebraska Cornhuskers, a team that went 3-9 overall in the 2021 season. And this team last year is now widely considered to be the best 3-9 team of all time. And there's reason to see why. This team took 7 losses within 1 score last season. All 9 losses came within 10 points, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, it's pretty likely that we'll rarely, if ever, see something like that ever again. 9 losses within 10 points. But that said, how this team be in 2022, that's what we go over here today. We'll be going over the players that this team will be losing, who they'll be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with their notable games from last season. And this team, once again, many of them, this team played up with the best teams in the country, and they just could not get they were all close games, but Nebraska just could not get in the winning column of many of those games, and they lost to Oklahoma 16-23. That was a big one, going on the road to Norman. At the time, I think Oklahoma was ranked in the top 3, if I'm right. They were number 2 or number 3, so that was a close loss. Nebraska kept it close. Should have beat Michigan State, but took the loss 20-23 in overtime. Beat Northwestern 56-7. Talk about an outlier. Beating Northwestern 56-7 and taking losses like this team has. Turns out that Northwestern win on October 2nd was the last win of the season for Nebraska. This is a pretty remarkable season that Nebraska had last year in a bad way. They lost to Michigan 29-32. Michigan, turns out they went to the college football playoff and were the Big Ten champions, and Nebraska was very close to beating them. Kept it within 1 score against Wisconsin as well, 20-35. That was a road game. Nebraska kept it close there and lost to Iowa, of course, 21-28 in a game that it looked like they controlled it for a good majority of the game, but in the end, Iowa got the win by a touchdown, which is, it's just a fitting way to finish out the season for Nebraska, is to control that game from the start. And turns out Iowa comes back and beats you by a touchdown. But if you look at some other games on their schedule, they lost by 5 to Purdue. They lost by 9 to Ohio State. Only allowed Ohio State to score 26 points in that game. Lost to Minnesota by a touchdown as well. And if you look back in week 0, they lost to Illinois by 8. So, if you look at all 9 of the losses that this team took, they're all within 10 points, and 7 of them, pretty remarkably, are within 7 points. First 6 games, they were 3-3. They also beat Fordham and Buffalo, other than that Northwestern win. And in the last 6, they were 0-6. Did not win a game past that Northwestern one. But Ross Brave going into next season, looking forward to 2022. Adrian Martinez has transferred out. He is in Kansas State now. So you got Casey Thompson coming in, former Texas quarterback, who definitely shows potential. We haven't seen him. He hasn't played too terribly much. Last season with Texas, that was his first main season as a starting quarterback. Put up 2,100 yards, along with 24 touchdowns, 9 picks, 63% completion rate. So stats were not terrible last season for Casey Thompson. And considering he is a young quarterback, he's definitely got potential. He's a dual-threat quarterback, but not quite as much as Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez was an outstanding rusher last season for this team. Rushed for over 500 yards and 13 touchdowns last season. If you look at his passing stats, 2,800 yards, 14 touchdowns, over 10 interceptions, and a 62% completion rate. So his passing stats were okay, not great, but rushing he was the top rusher on this team last season, which is pretty insane. Adrian Martinez, though, dual-threat quarterback, but the thing is about him is he's terribly inconsistent, and that was kind of an issue for this team. He'd make a couple of bad mistakes towards the end of the game, and that would cost the Cornhuskers the game. So certainly we'll see. It's going to be good for Nebraska to get a fresh start. New quarterback, Casey Thompson, coming in. Ramir Johnson coming back, top running back from last season. This team had a lot of rushers last year. Ramir Johnson was the leader in yardage with just over 600 yards of offense, 6 touchdowns, and nearly 500 of rushing. Jaquez Yant is coming back, put up 294 yards, 1 touchdown on rushing last season. So that's, the running back situation looks pretty good for this team going to next year. Receiving-wise, you lose Samori Toure. Last season, put up over 960 yards, 6 touchdowns as well, which is going to be, that's a tough loss. He surprised a lot of people, and he came out and had a great season. Nearly 1,000 yards of offense, which is, that's going to be a tough loss. Austin Allen, tight end, definitely a guy that should not be overlooked. He put up over 600 yards of offense, 2 touchdowns, I mean, he's going to be a good tight end in the NFL. I could see him definitely having some success. Omar Manning's coming back, the second wideout on this team and third in receiving last season. He put up 380 yards and 2 touchdowns. Definitely a receiver that I see some major potential in. Xavier Betts' future is uncertain for him currently. It looks like he's not on the team, which is a big concern. He is a receiver who had put up nearly 400 yards of offense last season. So I mean, that's a guy that you want back, and it doesn't look like he's gonna be back right now. I mean, he's all that we know is that he's off the team. So we'll see how that situation unfolds over the course of the next few months. But receiving core, there is going to be some inexperience there in the receiving core going into next season. So that is a bit of a concern for me. But Omar Manning certainly is. He's going to have a huge part in this offense next year, I can imagine. They lose 1 on the offensive line, 3 defensive linemen, 3 in the secondary. So defensively, you lose a few key players, especially on the D line. Secondary, you also lose a few. Defensively, there's a couple of tough losses. This defense was good last season. I feel like they don't get anywhere near enough credit defensively. I mean, this team kept Ohio State to 26 points, which is remarkable considering how the Buckeyes' offense was last season. That's how they kept them. That's how this team was close in games, was because of their defense, the way that they were playing. But offensively, just could not get it done. That cost them a lot of games. And a few mistakes definitely cost this team a lot of wins. This team they were capable of being 7-5, 8-4 at least last season. I could have seen this team with the talent that they had, the way that they're playing in a lot of these games. I mean, this is a 3-9 team that has the talent and had the potential to go 8-4 or 9-3 last season. So that's something you got to keep in mind going into next season. If this team can flip some of those close games to wins, this team could be a contender next season. So potential Big Ten dark horse in 2022. Fresh start, new quarterback. I think this team, this is Scott Frost. This is make or break time for him. He is gone if Nebraska doesn't at least get to a bowl game next year. So certainly lots on the line here. But this team I do think is a dark horse. If you look at how they were last season and how they played, this team, they show some big potential going into next year. I like the upside on this team. Transfer portal and recruiting now going into next season. Chubba Purdy's coming in from Florida State, quarterback. Looks like he'll be the quarterback of the future. Casey Rogers, defensive lineman, is in the transfer portal. You got Tommy Hill, defensive back. He'll be a playmaker coming in from ASU. Omar Brown, defensive back, coming in from Northern Iowa. Will Honus, linebacker, off to Kansas State. DeAndre Jackson, running back, coming in from A&M, Texas A&M. Trey Palmer, receiver, coming in from LSU. He'll be a guy to watch out for as well. And then Hunter Anthony, offensive tackle, coming in from Oklahoma State. So multiple big playmakers coming in from the transfer portal for the Cornhuskers. These are just 8 of the notable players involved with Nebraska in the transfer portal. There's way more than 8. But recruiting-wise, 41st nationally, 10th in the Big Ten. So a little bit lower than usual in the Big Ten rankings. But certainly I feel like, this team in the transfer portal has done just fine, despite the recruiting being a bit lower than usual. 2 4-stars coming in and then 16 3-stars. That said, let's look at your schedule now going into next season. Start off the season in Ireland against Northwestern, neutral location game. And the Wildcats are looking like, I would say, a bottom 2 team in the Big Ten West going into next season. Then you got North Dakota coming to town on the 3rd, Georgia Southern, Oklahoma as well on the 17th. That's a huge game. Then you got a bye week, and then Indiana coming to town on the 1st. So really don't have an actual road game until October 7th, Friday night against Rutgers. You got Purdue on the road, 15th. Then you got Illinois coming to town on the 29th, Minnesota at home, Michigan on the road, Wisconsin, then Iowa on the road to finish out the season. So not a terribly difficult schedule, especially versus last season. This team had a brutal schedule for the 2021 season. But now if you look at some of the conference games and some of the crossover games, you got Indiana, Rutgers, which those 2 teams are certainly looking like they're going to be in the bottom 3 of the Big Ten East next season. Then Michigan, of course. But Michigan, they'll be a contender. They'll be a good team. Certainly going to be a challenge there in Ann Arbor on November 12th. But that said, let's looking at the first half of the schedule here. Northwestern, neutral location on the 27th. All favor Nebraska there. I feel like Northwestern next season, still a pretty inexperienced team. And I feel like after last season, I don't see much improvement that could be had there. So I'm gonna favor Nebraska right now against Northwestern in Ireland. North Dakota, Georgia Southern, both easy wins, I feel like. Georgia Southern could potentially be a decent team, but I'm pretty comfortable with picking Nebraska there Oklahoma at home. This is a game that is pretty much a coin toss for me. This could change once we get into our official predictions here in the late spring and into summer. But Oklahoma, I'm going to favor the Sooners right now, but it is like 51% towards the Sooners because, I mean, it's Nebraska at home in that game. It was incredibly close last season in Norman. And also, if you look at how Oklahoma's doing, they certainly have got a lot of question marks and a lot of big changes going to next season. So an early season matchup in Lincoln against Nebraska could potentially be a trap game for OU. October 1st against Indiana. I'll favor Nebraska there as well. Same thing with Rutgers on the road on a Friday on the 7th. That Rutgers game on the road, I mean, Rutgers shouldn't be that good next season, but with it being on the road on a Friday, that's certainly not a game that you want to look over because, I mean, it certainly could be a bit closer than expected going on the road. Sleepy environment on a Friday, so keep that one in mind. But I definitely want to favor Nebraska in both of those games. Second half of the schedule, Purdue on the road. That will be a challenge there. Boilermakers should be good once again next season. But I'll favor Nebraska there. Same thing with Illinois and Minnesota. Illinois shouldn't be very good. Minnesota could be good. I could see them in the 8 to 10 win range next season. So that's definitely going to be a challenging one. But with it being in Lincoln, I'll give Nebraska the edge there. Last three games are your toughest conference games, I would say. You got Michigan on the road. That will be a tough one. I'm pretty comfortable favoring Michigan there with it being on the road. Towards the end of the season, Wolverines, I wouldn't be surprised if they were a top 10, top 15 team for a good chunk of next year. Wisconsin at home, that's pretty much a 50-50 game. I mean, it's in Lincoln, and it was incredibly close in Madison last year, but I'm going to favor Wisconsin barely in that matchup right now. And of course, once again, things could change as we look forward to our official predictions coming out here in the late spring and summer, and I'll pick every game one by one officially, but Iowa on the road on the 25th. I will favor the Hawkeyes right now. They're barely, mainly because, I mean, Nebraska hasn't beaten Iowa in almost a decade, so it'd be kind of, I mean, it's tough to predict a game or like Nebraska to win in that situation when they haven't beaten Iowa in nearly a decade. So regular projection 6-6 to 10-2 for this team. The ceiling's very high. The floor is at 6-6. I feel like this team is. I mean, I personally feel like there's a great chance. I mean, there's definitely a higher chance than not that this team makes a bowl game. I like the talent on this team. I feel like this is finally the year that they get to a bowl game, and a step in the right direction is. I think in the future for this team. Ceiling's 10-2. I mean, the chance of this team getting 10 wins is pretty low, but I feel like the 7 to 8 win range is probably the area that I feel like this team will be in next season. 9 wins potentially, but I feel like 7 to 8 is probably the most likely scenario. But let me know your thoughts and comments below on Nebraska, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.